All right, here we go. This was the bombshell, pretty stunning piece of college football news that came down yesterday from Pete Thamel and ESPN. Here we go. It's Brennan SORSBY, the Texas Tech quarterback who transferred in from Cincinnati.
Well, Matt, there's two compelling buckets that this story can be broken into. And the first is we have the first prominent athlete in college sports to admit a gambling addiction and go check himself into a facility. That, in my mind, is unprecedented, and it will be fascinating to see culturally what unfolds from there. The second piece of this, obviously, is the collegiate eligibility bucket. According to NCAA rules, and what we know about Brendan SORSBY's gambling, that he placed thousands of bets on a gambling app, and also that when he was a redshirt freshman at Indiana in 2022, he bet on the Hoosiers to win. Those, history would tell us, would make it very difficult for Brendan SORSBY to regain eligibility. The NCAA has a strict rule for athletes and even staffers that they cannot bet on college or professional sports.
All right, so there's Pete Thamel with the conversation. It's a pretty stunning piece, and word out of Lubbock that he has entered that facility. But as you dig on this story, Jack, the background is this, just for folks who are, okay, who's Brendan SORSBY? 6'3", 235-pound senior. He's originally from Denton, Texas. He attended Lake Dallas High School. And as you heard there with Pete Thamel, he committed to Indiana out of high school. He was a three-star recruit in Indiana at that time. It was a whole different Indiana when he was entering college. That was before Kurt Signetti. They were still one of the worst programs in the Big Ten. But he committed to Indiana, redshirted there as a freshman, and this is where apparently, according to all these gambling apps are tracked. And so this has been going on all the way back to his redshirt, his freshman year at Indiana, where he was placing bets. Then the second year after his redshirt, he was the on-again, off-again starter. And then he transferred to Cincinnati after that year, where he led the Bearcats the past two seasons. And he became one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 last year, a dual-threat quarterback, breakout season in 2025. He had 2,800 yards through the air, 27 touchdowns, also ran for almost 600 yards and 9 more. Bearcats went 7-5. This offseason, he entered the transfer portal in January, became one of the most sought-after players in that portal. He, of course, is the new, agreed to a lucrative NIL deal and rev share deal with Texas Tech, reportedly worth upwards of $5 million for this season. He was expected to be the centerpiece of the Red Raiders offense in 2026. Now you bring in the idea of gambling. Now, here's what I have to say. Cincinnati had reportedly been alerted to the NCAA's investigation of his gambling before last season. Okay, so this news where he enters the facility for addiction, this was known by Cincinnati last year before he even played it down, that the NCAA had alerted the school, we're looking into this. So then he had his breakout campaign. Apparently Cincinnati's already known. And, it also should be added to this that he faces, SORSBY does, a separate legal issue with the Bearcats. They have sued him for allegedly breaching a multi-season revenue-sharing agreement that he committed to with them. And they're asking for a $1 million buyout from him. Okay, so that's where this stands. And so Cincinnati is because Cincinnati's side of this is when he left Indiana to come to Cincinnati, he agreed to a 2-year commitment.
Yeah.
Or, a multi-year commitment. He played 2 years and then left in the middle of it, they say. And he was supposed to be their quarterback again this year in the Big 12. He took the bigger, richer deal. Indiana wants their piece of that. But now this takes a whole different angle. What did Texas Tech know? Jack, when did they had to have known if Cincinnati was alerted to it?
Sure.
This had to have been known that he was, and so what is the idea of entering the facility? Look, addiction's the real deal, and this is mental health. And in their statement, Texas Tech remained focused on supporting SORSBY during his treatment, which is consistent with how programs will typically handle any personal or mental health matters for players. They're not going to get into the weeds of the details. They're going to say, we're supporting our player at this point as he enters counseling after spring practice. So, again, when I say there are more questions than answers, there are more questions than answers. I want your thoughts, Jack, but let's get Andy Staples here talking about his reporting. Most of it comes from Pete Thamel, but them talking about the ramifications of where it is now and where it could go.
And now you have a situation where Brendan SORSBY came from Cincinnati to Texas Tech this offseason. What did Texas Tech need? Better offense. What happened to them? They got shut out in the Orange Bowl by Oregon. They had bought a really good roster, but they didn't buy a good enough offense. They bought a really good defense. They had not bought a really good offense. They needed a better quarterback. They needed more consistent quarterback play. So they go get Brendan Sorsby from Cincinnati. One of the biggest investments in the transfer portal. We've talked about what dollar figures you're dealing with. You're dealing with $5 million plus for 1 year for a quarterback. And we don't know what's going to happen now, because the NCAA is investigating this, and depending on how it went. So Pete Thamel from ESPN reported that it's thousands of bets, but the ones that you probably, if you're Texas Tech, you're worried about the most, according to ESPN's Pete Thamel, would be the ones when he was redshirting at Indiana and allegedly placed bets on Indiana games.
No, he bet on them to win, Jack. I don't know if that'll matter, but thousands of bets. Like, this guy was betting on ball strike pitches in baseball games. I mean, and this goes to the addiction part of it. But again, the NCAA has rules on gambling. They're pretty specific, and if you go back to last fall, they changed the rules. They loosened the rules on student athletes gambling, and the coaches, especially in the SEC, Steve Sarkisian was up in arms about it. They're like, whoa. Can we amend this? And then so in October of last year, they amended it with the new rules, essentially going back to the old rules that they had loosened. So this is a tough spot for Texas Tech, to say the least. But again, are you going to feel bad for them if they knew, if this was out there, that they took the chance, or were they surprised by this as well? Those are the questions we have.
The precedent is that he is done. He will not play. I mean, you go back to the kid, what was it, Hunter Deckers at Iowa State. I mean, this is not the first time this has happened. I'm not saying. I think he was checked into a facility. I think they're trying to get ahead of something.
Yes.
Because I think that this is only going to get bigger. I do think that this kid clearly has a gambling addiction, because he was in live attendance at Major League Baseball games, betting on balls and strikes for like very small amounts too, it was anywhere from like under $1 to like $5, I think is what I read.
Well, I'll just say, as someone who used to do that with dollar bills at ball games, my buddies and I would do the exact same thing. We just have a whole handful of ones, and we'd be betting on outcomes of pitches, balls, strikes, what's going to happen. And you'd hand the same money back and forth throughout the course of a ball game. And now, because of technology, you can do that on an app. Mm-hmm. And, again, and here are the rules as of October. These are the NCAA in October passed a rule allowing players, staff to vote. Here's where it stands. It rescinded a month later. So they passed the rule in October. They rescinded it a month later when enough schools like Steve Sarkisian in Texas and the SEC coaches came out. Kirby Smart was very vocal about this. It says here, if a player engages in activities to influence the outcome of their own games or knowingly provides information to people in the sports betting, that player will potentially face permanent loss of eligibility in all sports. That applies to players who wager on their own games and other sports they're within their own school. So the baseball stuff may not be that big of a deal as far as the NCAA goes and their own rules.
Yeah, no, that was me more commenting on this guy clearly likes betting a little too much.
He does, and that's why he's entered a facility. But it's going to go back to those years where he was at Indiana. Mm-hmm. And is there, statute of limitations on that? Is there plausible deniability? Did he bet on them to win? And that's why I say more questions than answers, because the NCAA's investigation could say yes, but he didn't influence out. He wasn't even playing in the games that we're talking about here. He was redshirting, and that's going to become a question and a rub. But look, if you're right and the precedent is Hunter Deckers and there's these other things, and he is now suspended and he loses his eligibility, his college career is then over.
And you understand why they would have to have such a hard line on this.
I think, go ahead, because it's a deterrent. You have to make sure that the punishment is going to deter others from even considering it. Right. You got to, because again, people will talk about how it's become so public and everybody gambles and all the pro sports are embracing it. But, the idea, because, this was when I talk about just handing dollar bills to my buddies or whatnot, or you bet with a bookie, or you're doing, behind the scenes stuff. Well, now it's all public. I mean, this stuff's all traceable now. That's why they can tell you that he made thousands of bets. And this is normally when these things get uncovered, or now the norm is it's the apps. and it's the services that are the ones reporting the red flag. This is a red flag, and this is where this came from. But Texas Tech is in a spot now. Look, there is no spring portal window anymore.
No.
They don't, and the NCAA just in the first day of April of this month enacted their new ghost transfer portal rules. That does not allow for players. There are now rules against a player transferring if they didn't enter the transfer portal back in January, when the only window. It's at that 2-week window back in January. As we've said many times, if you enter the portal in that and don't take your name out of it, you're still in it. So there would be whoever's names are in that portal. But if the Red Raiders decided to try to add a quarterback who's not currently in the transfer portal, the ghost transfer they call that, here are the new rules as of April 1st that they would face: a suspension of the head coach for 50% of the season and a fine equivalent to 20% of the program's annual rev share dollars. So 20% of $21 million, they would be docked for taking a player. And those are the rules as of 28 days ago. So, and right now, Texas Tech's backup quarterback, and by my read, the only other comparable quarterback they could go to if Brendan Sorsby is ruled ineligible by the NCAA is Hutto product Will Hammond,
right?
Who's a good player,
yeah.
But at the same time, he tore his ACL last year. He just now returned to throwing in the last 10 days. He did not participate in the spring for Texas Tech. There is a chance he could be healthy for Abilene Christian week 1 for the Red Raiders. But, he's coming off an ACL at the end of last year or during last year. Who knows? But I think that's their only quarterback right now. And the other part of this is, well, if he's ineligible, what happens to the $5 million? Has he gotten the $5 million, or is that going to be paid to him, and now he's not going to get that money?
How much of that's in the bank account already?
How much have they already given him? And what about this Cincinnati lawsuit where they want their $1 million for him breaking their agreement, which is still in the courts? And I think the SORSBY camp has recently pushed to have that thrown out. But we don't know where that stands. So this thing is a kettle of fish, man. This is a mess. This is the transfer portal at its worst at a lot of levels that, but again, I go back. The piece of information that really stunned me is that Cincinnati's known about this investigation since the start of last year. So essentially, he left Indiana with this baggage, went to Cincinnati. At what point did he stop with the gambling? And that's why the fact that he's entered or maybe he hasn't stopped. I mean, this would go to the addiction part. If the NCAA is investigating you, what's going on here? And that's where you say it's an idea to look. Again, we're going to take mental health addiction seriously, but this thing's been going on for a while now.
No, when I say that I think they're trying to get ahead of something, I think Texas Tech knows that this is now coming down, and they're trying to, make him look as good as possible, because I think it's either I don't know the extent of it. I don't think anybody does at this point. But if this kid does indeed have a problem, we all want him to get all the help that he can get, of course. But I think Texas Tech, him entering the facility as the kind of first part of this story that we're all learning about, I think that is of note.
Yes, agreed.
And he's entered a facility, and there's an investigation happening. That means the investigation is going to go poorly.
Yes,
it's my cynical thought.
Or as you say,
he's a kid and he needs to get help if he needs help, and that's first and foremost. But I'm just saying that we've seen these investigations and things start to happen.
Yeah, well, and we know the NCAA is some would say, take their time. They're deliberate with these things, but that's what we'll wait on, because if he's ruled ineligible, there'll be an appeal, I would imagine, and that's part of this entering counseling. He's trying to get help. He didn't bet on his own team. He didn't do any of that at Cincinnati. He followed the guidelines. Because look, at that point, if he's at Cincinnati and if he's just doing the app stuff on baseball and Major League Baseball games,
that's legal. That's fine.
That's legal. It's going to go back to that Indiana and what he did as a redshirt freshman, and that's to the point of where we're at. So who knows? Who knows?
My thought that it goes to the football side of things is somebody's going to sue to enter the transfer portal, right? Because the NCAA is impotent, and that's where we're at. And
you think someone will try to get to Texas Tech?
Yeah, and I think Texas Tech will either eat the money or suspend the coach, whatever they have to do. Because do you think Texas Tech has a more talented roster than U of H?
Close. They play this year.
They do.
Willie Fritz, a real good coach.
And then Arizona State. That's the other one that's close. Maybe, but I think maybe they've taken a step back this year from what they were a couple of seasons ago.
You're talking about their quarterbacks just up and leaving.
No, I'm looking at Texas Tech's schedule because you said suspended for half the season.
Oh, you're talking about
Joey McGuire? Because that's Abilene Christian, Oregon State, Houston, Sam Houston, Colorado, and Arizona State. Joey McGuire not being on that team, you add, I don't know, Dylan Raiola, and then that's still a team that could make the college football playoff. So you're
saying you think that's going to happen?
I wouldn't be. I'm not saying I think. I'm saying I
hope it does not. I mean, even
too.
Texas Tech. Again, this investigation has been ongoing. If he's ineligible, that's on them. You know, they are putting rules in place now, right? The ghost rules just went in place because people have asked for put guardrails on this thing. Guys, you just can't up and leave. We've gotten rid of the spring transfer portal for this very reason. If you want to be in the portal and you want to transfer, player empowerment, player movement, do it in January. Put yourself in that portal. If you didn't, you now can't transfer without some severe punishment. And that's the severe punishment on the program. And I would say to your point about Texas Tech and just half of the season for Joey McGuire, it's the 20% of that rev share money. That's a lot of money.
All those guys that they paid would have to get some of that back.
Now, can they recoup it? Is that legal? Again, who knows what's legal and not legal? That's where we're at with this thing. But, if Texas Tech then, if they lose this player who they knew was under investigation by the NCAA and then go poach another quarterback and are just going to put up with the penalties, that's going to be villainous. That is terrible if that is going to be the case. But
do they care?
That's right. That's what I'm saying. But I hope they don't. Desperate teams will do what they need to do to win football games. I don't think Texas Tech's planning to take a step back, and that's why they were willing to outbid LSU and others for SORSBY to get him as their quarterback. But now there's also the chance that he is ruled eligible, and they say, good luck with
if they don't have him, their season's over.
Oh, sure.
Name one team that can survive just not having their starting quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, they could win some games with Will Hammond as he gets healthy.
They'll probably win 10.
No, but there's a reason they invested $5 million in this quarterback because he's good, and that gives you a chance. It is such a sordid story at this point.